What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Unfucking Your CX. Of course, I'm your host, Zach Hamilton. But what you really care about is who's the practitioner that's jumping into the hot seat today and what is she going to unfuck? So I'm really excited for Jannecke to join the hot seat today. How are you, Jannecke?
Hi, Zach. I'm fine, and thank you for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, we were both just talking about how cold it is in our respective areas. So why don't you tell our guests, where are you joining the hot seat from?
So I'm joining in from Oslo, Norway, Northern Europe, and yes, it's really chilly right now. With a lot of snow and freezing weather. But yeah, we make the most out of it.
I bet if you can get past the cold, though, it's probably absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, if you do, I like, for instance, to go ice skating, and well, that's beautiful in this weather.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jannecke, before we jump into today's conversation, I always ask every guest, kind of set the scene. Where does this type of conversation typically happen for you? Is it at your favorite restaurant? Are we at a pub? Are we walking through the woods? Are we ice skating today? Like, where's this going to happen?
Well, I mean, if you ask some of my closest friends, they probably say everywhere because this is a topic really, really close to my heart. But yeah, I've been in this space for a long time. I coach and support different organizations. I run a network called the Customer Community here in Norway. Yeah, this is something I do 24/7 for sure, and every opportunity to discuss and try to be a missionary on the topic, Zach. I make the most out of.
Well, I love it because it's very similar to me. I don't think I can ever really turn it off. I think I know I struggle with turning it off.
Hmm.
I mean, my 7-year-old now, after we get done like at Walmart, he'll say, "So, Dad, what do you think about that experience?"
Exactly.
But like you said, Jannecke, you've been such a missionary in customer experience, especially over in Europe. You have your community. You've been coaching. What's that one topic right now that's just really making you cringe?
I think maybe it's the same as it's been in a long time, but it really comes through now. What really makes me sort of react a little is that this topic is still treated as something soft, like only a culture or mindset or a frontline behavior issue. And it makes me react because no, it's not. It's a government governance issue more than anything else, and that's where really why I want to take any discussion on the topic.
Ready to dig in. I'm so ready to dig in because one, I absolutely I should just fucking cringe when I see all these LinkedIn posts about CX as a mindset and
Hmm.
it's your culture. And I'm just like, freaking gag me because it's not. It's not. So why do you think so many brands just continue to think about it that way?
Maybe because of course the human element is important and it's in the human interaction that a lot of the value is created for sure. And you know why? To be honest, if I had the had the true answer to that, I'd definitely be able to change the conversation around it for a long time ago. So I think yeah, it is mind-boggling. I think yes, the human part is of course super important. I'm not saying that. That's just saying, I want this is business value. This is, core competing strength. So this should be much more than just talking about the soft elements of things.
Yeah, you triggered a thought in my mind. I think at CX as we know it, right? I don't know what you call it. Discipline. I call it a performance system, right? Some
Mhm.
folks look at it as a practice or a strategy. Do you think part of this is we struggle to really figure out where we belong in an organization, right? So you have departments who are like, marketing, brand promise. You have your mission, vision, and values of the organization. And so CX wants to be that kind of, hey, we're the culture, we're the mindset. This. Do you think it's just part of it's just like trying to figure out where we can belong and have the most influence or
Yeah, and at the same time, it's also a question who are we, right? Because at least in Northern Europe, there's no huge CX unit in any organization. It's depending on who's actually either taking on the mandate or actually getting the mandate. And it is a leadership issue overall. For instance, in the community I'm running, there are several executives, they don't have CX in their title at all, and they don't run a separate CX unit or anything. This is integrated for those that really succeed. So in that sense, yes, you're right. I mean, it's hard to put the box and say this is where you're supposed to belong, because it depends a lot on the context of the organization and the setup itself.
I think the key word there that you just said though was integrated. So talk to me a little bit about that. You said, a lot of the executives that you talk to, it's not part of their title, it's just integrated in the day-to-day that they do, which is why they're having the most success. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when we started a boutique consultancy in this space already in 2010, we didn't even use the CX word because it didn't resonate with any of the executives that we or clients that we were talking to. So it's all about getting it into our business as being part of the business strategy. And really, focusing on where do we create value, having this really on the table. So in that sense, it needs to be integrated. It needs to be part of the strategy. And if it's not, from my point of view, sometimes I actually leave the table sack because I feel then it's hard to bring value and it's hard to contribute. So, I don't believe it should be separated as a separate, well, of course, it's a discipline in the sense that it's perspectives that you bring in, but it shouldn't be treated as something totally different and separate from the overall thing. Like, for instance, I don't believe in the separate CX strategy. It should be integrated. And if it's not, it's going to be hard to succeed, right?
I love this conversation. I want to tap on one other word that you mentioned too, which was governance, right?
Mm,
So it's really a governance challenge or a leadership challenge. And I'm with you. I mean, even at my time at Aaron's, I learned very quickly when I started leading CX that if I tried to have a separate CX strategy, separate types of measurement, I mean, the business already had 15, 20 KPIs, right?
exactly.
Now I want to add a few more. I learned in my first 60 days, it just wasn't going to work. And so I had to reapproach it, right, and really integrate it as part of the system. And the other word that you mentioned was governance and leadership. So talk
Yeah.
to me about that.
Well, let's then focus on a part of actually again going back to value. I talk a lot about bad profit. You probably heard Fred Reichel talked about bad profit, right? And I think one of the issues there was it was treated as a moral issue, and I don't believe it's a moral issue. I think it's the system that is set up wrong, right? I think it's a way of and not understanding your revenue streams and understanding how insecure or how unstable they are actually, and then understanding the risk element that you have, right? A lot of decisions currently are taking on the wrong premises in the sense that we have systems set up to secure short-term prioritization, right? And it makes it very risky to think long term in many organizations. And that means that it's easy to secure incomes that you can have today at the risk of actually pushing customers away from you, for instance. So I think there's a lot of the way of the system itself is set up in supporting you for these short-term quarterly reporting goals, but it doesn't really balance out and help leaders take decisions for the long term.
I mean, I couldn't say it any better. I think a lot of who we are, if I look back at my time, I was essentially like a systems integrator. I was a systems thinker, systems
Mm,
designer
mm,
for the organization. I think the other piece too that you're talking about from prioritization, before we get to the player tips, is I see too often part of we know from a customer experience pieces we don't have control over the P&L. We don't have the resource allocation at our disposal like our cross-functional peers do. So we have to influence, you know, what customer friction, for example, we need to get prioritized to redesign, rethink, rebuild the policy, whatever it
mm,
is.
mm,
And I think where I've seen too often where CX leaders fall down is they always try to go for like the 12, 18, 24, 36-month transformation project when their CEO is just fighting to stay alive quarter to quarter right now,
okay.
right? And they're juggling short-term
Yeah,
profit,
yeah, yeah.
long-term profitability, right? And so I'm curious, just in your experience, um, do you see the same problem and challenge? And does it come back to this governance piece?
Yes, I do see it. And yes, I do think it comes back to the government piece. And I think And I think that's why I want to take away the moral side of things, because then you don't realize the sort of reality that these executives are in the middle of. And to be honest, on behalf of maybe the discipline as well, Zach, there's been a lot of idealistic, we want to make the perfect customer experience. And it's so far from today's reality that it's difficult for these executives to see how are we gonna sort of make the steps to get there, right? Because it's so far away from the day-to-day priorities the tough priorities that they need to do. So I think we have a challenge in trying to really understand the reality of today and build the steps that do create value on the way, but that doesn't start only with the ideal case. It's so easy to have this sort of vision of what you want to do, but also have the starting point of where we're at today and how we can move from there.
So let's say, we have a lot of listeners who, they're trying to mature their strategy, right? And part of what you wanted, what's making you cringe is this, we're a soft discipline, it's about culture, mindset, and frontline behaviors. I was looking at my note there. How do you help kind of unfuck this mindset really to, what's that first player tip of, look, we're an integrated business system.
Yeah.
And it's about governance and leadership, and it's about value creation.
Exactly. Well, I think one of the starting points that I usually take is back again to this element of bad profit. So trying to understand the revenue streams that you have today and understand where you actually are vulnerable. So we see what's at risk if the customers had full transparency or had real choice. Because then at least you can identify some areas where you really need to find ownership and see if this is an area you need to move in order to secure a future revenue and in that sense really help the business. So I think helping in identifying these revenue streams, moving the discussions from margins to durability of earnings, and also assigning ownership in replacing these revenue streams is super important.
I think that's, look, for so long, I think CX, I don't think we, for a lot of CXers, it wasn't that we did it wrong. We did what we were taught to do, which was go out and get sponsorship. And it's really
Mm,
easy to be a sponsor, but to your point, when it becomes about ownership, it's also
mm,
about owning the outcome
mm.
that experience is delivering, right? And so I'm with you. A couple of my takeaways here on this player tip from you is, one, you have to really understand how your business makes money. Like, how do they really operate? How do we make money? Um, and I know a lot of CX thought leaders are out there, challenge executives about profit over people. I think it's profit through people. But let's just be
Exactly.
honest, if you're not profitable, none of us are going to be here, including our customers, right? So the business has to make money. And then my other kind of big takeaway here is just thinking about kind of that bad profit. And it reminded me, Jannecke, I was just doing this exercise with a retailer where we looked at their friction drag over the last 12 months.
Mhm.
Friction drag and how it's compounding impact was more than their customer acquisition cost.
Mhm. And what did you do in the end?
Well, it was one, I think it was alarming for this
Mm,
for the CMO, and I think the CEO and the CX leader to really look
mm,
at this. I mean, I've always
mm.
said you can't outmarket a bad experience. But I think the next question I had that came up to your point, which was ownership. And so my question was, who owns these customer frictions? And they couldn't write down their name to anyone.
No. No, and I think that brings me over to another topic, related topic on journey ops, which I think also is a topic that you are really
Yeah.
passionate about, Zach. And I think, too many still, I think this is a super interesting and very valuable field now, evolving extremely, but it's still, I just still not really see many organizations where authority stays within the journey, or where they actually have sort of cross-functional authority when managing a journey, right? So we're still struggling in this area where the journey management is really just exercise for collaboration. It's not really sort of governance or really moving the targets for the organization. And so this is definitely also an area where I hope we can get much more attention and really how can we do this properly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It brings us to our second player tip.
Yeah, and I think my this is really my core tip in the journey up space is um, define ownership with authority to resolve cross-functional trade-offs. I think that's core. And I think it's, it sounds easy, and it's usually not, because what happens today is, when you're working on journey management, you still inherit the old operating model with the power budgets and the KPIs that sit in the functions. But the player tip is you need to challenge that if you really want to move out of a sort of facilitating player game, and actually make sure that this really creates value. So I think you need to treat Journey Ops as a management system and not as a collaboration exercise.
I love this one. What I love the word is trade-offs, right?
Mm,
Because I think so often what we underestimate our role as in customer experience is really around decision velocity,
yeah,
right? If you really
yeah,
think about it, our executive leaders every single day, they are just thinking about what decisions do I need to make today. And so a lot of times as CX leaders, we come to them with a lot of problems versus here's the problem. If we don't prioritize it, this is what we're trading off, right? So we trade off the cost of inaction. And
exactly.
so, it is a skill that you have to learn to be able to one, frame a problem, and then two, be able to talk about the cost of inaction, and then let them sit with that decision of, are we willing to trade off this specific initiative in this one to take on this one? Because so many people don't understand. Look, it's not just about saying yes. And if you're truly going and doing it, you're trading off internal resource allocation, right? You're trading off budgets, for example. You're trading off, to your point, like that journey management, the cross-functional piece of it. Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
so many trade-offs. Why do you think we underestimate that as a CX leader?
I mean, I think you're totally right. I think that customer centricity usually fails at the first big trade-off discussion, right? And it's usually because we haven't prepared the organization for the sort of issues that might arise and prepare for the discussions that we need to have. So then it comes to we thought we agreed, we thought we had everything in place. We thought we didn't need to take into consideration these sort of trade-offs, and then we're not set up to do it. We're not prepared. So I think, as long as it's not the mandate for someone to actually run that discussion and actually do the trade-offs and get it into the operating model, as I talked about before, it's going to be tough, because then you do need to do improvise around, these sort of discussions, right? Because it's not set in the operating model.
Yeah, so spot on here. And it reminds me of some work that we did. If you think about like cross-functional work, even in cross-functional work, every department within your organization still just shows up and does kind of their task list.
Mm,
And when they want to talk about, okay, we're part of this cross-functional initiative, when they do the readout, it's still their specific KPI that they are thinking about. And so we actually started to create what we call journey pods based off of, for example, customer segments. And yes, there was a member of each kind of department from a cross-functional team in the journey pod. But what we actually set was think about, throw away all your KPIs that you look at on a department level. Your goal is to go increase customer lifetime value of this specific segment. And we gave them that target over the course of the year, right? So now they had to be thinking about not just acquisition, but then what happens after the purchase? How do we win those customers back? And they have to think, the marketing team had to think about the entire journey. Just like operations, they had to think about, okay, customer acquisition, are we truly executing that when it comes into our store, the messaging they put out in the market? And that's where we really leveraged significant growth. I'm curious, like, in your mind, why are organizations just not there yet?
Well, I mean, actually, even the example that you come up with now, it's quite late, isn't it, to have that sort of discussion? Because you should really have it as a drill down as part of the strategic prioritization that you do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
some of the most mature organizations that I work with, they have these sort of marketplace type events during the strategy because they need to sync across different units. And so they need to go and trade, right? If we contribute with these resources and these priorities in this area, will you help us in that area, so that actually the KPIs and the strategic priorities are aligned before you start, right? And those organizations that have these events on a sort of a quarterly basis are much more set up to actually make sure the whole organization can run, right? And then resolve any issues that are more within the mandate of a different, a specific product management team, for instance, that you don't need to have new discussions popping up all the time. Does that make sense? I think.
Absolutely. I think it's well said. That brings us up to the third player tip.
Yes, even if I say that, um, I think we talk too much about soft issues in CX or customer centricity overall. I do believe that this is partly our player tip on the soft side, because it's again about the alignment and you need to get. And what I actually do when I coach and work with boards or individuals is really focusing on resolving the ambiguity and actually aligning on the shared mental models in an organization. I mean, you've also been in this space for a long time, but you discover that even in an executive group or throughout an organization, they actually have different ideas or definitions about different core concepts that we're talking about, and they also have different ideas of where we're at in the transformation. Are we still in a learning phase or are we in execution? So I think actually spending time in aligning on core ideas and both where we're going, of course, but also where we're at, which stage we're really at, is underestimated. So that's really my third area of player tip. And I have had clients coming back to me saying, Jannecke, you're right. We should have spent more times in really aligning ourselves on ideas and concepts before moving on. And it's an everlasting part. So I think explicitly naming the phase you're in and having a discussion on where you're at any time, and also separate learning metrics from outcome metrics when you're setting up the different scopes that you have is super important. And also treating stamina as a leadership capability is something I often come back to. We underestimate the need for stamina in this field because it's ever evolving. So it's not a personality trait. It's something that we really need to build as a capability.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, Janneke, you've absolutely delivered a masterclass in 23 minutes.
Wow.
Thank you. I couldn't have said it any better. I think the stamina piece is, I haven't heard it framed that way, right? Of almost like that KPI or that capability, but you're right. It's ever changing, it's ever growing, especially if you think about consumer behavior, right?
Yeah.
Human behavior is constantly changing. So, Janneke, if any of our listeners want to go deeper with you in this topic, where can they find you?
Well, I mean, as you know, Zach, I'm engaging also on LinkedIn and I'm available there. But I also have a website. It could be a starting point to reach out. 'Cause, I run a company called Customer C, Norway based. So you can find me on customerc.com.
Yeah, and for all of our listeners, in the newsletter, in the show notes, we'll tag Janneke, her LinkedIn profile, as well as her website. So if you want to go deeper in this conversation, please reach out to her. And Janneke, it's been fantastic. Please come back to the hot seat soon.
Anytime, Zach. It's been great being here. Thank you for all the great work you're doing in this field.
I appreciate it. Cheers.
Bye bye.